Well, Shana Tova and Good Yontif. Oh, my goodness. Oh, my goodness. We're going to try that again, too. You know, it's funny because one of the things that I've been thinking about, all the more so actually experiencing right here today, is that because of the ways of the world and how we went from having 1,000-ish plus people here to then having me and Lisa in a production company, and then slowly starting to bring this back, I feel like many of us have fallen in the pattern of forgetting what we're supposed to do when we come together. We're out of practice. We're out of practice. So please know that on the Bima, Cantor and I are out of practice now with our new sound system that we have. Many thanks to everyone who helped to ensure we have our new sound system. At first, I was thrilled that Lisa put an entire bag of Hershey Kisses up here for me. And then I was reminded that it's not really for me. It's for everyone who is here today.
It's for me?
It's for you, Cantor. Very good. All right. And quite frankly, just being with everyone is such a nice feeling. And for those who aren't here physically, for those who are joining on live stream, we feel your presence as well, and we're thrilled that you're here. As I got to the back of the sanctuary, I was told all the more so by a board member that I should hang out in the back because it's a lot of fun back there. Thank you. Well, it really is a lot of fun to be back together and to have this sense of community and growth and commitment. It is truly wonderful. What I would like to do is begin just with a few thank yous, because we can't hear thank you enough for the things that we've done to help each other and to ensure that our congregation and the greater community are able to gather together like this on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and please God, many, many times for happy occasions throughout the year ahead. First, I just want to say, for those who are unable to attend our tot service, which includes me, because that was at Apache Camp this morning at 9 o'clock, we want to wish a special thank you to everyone who worked so hard to make sure that that service went on as it did, and that the camp was prepared, and that the tent that they were in had sides, because we were concerned about the weather, that it was going to be chilly, and it was. And to Erica Veroni and Bradley Eagle, who lead that service every year. And they bring such meaning for our kids and for our young families, and all the more so for grandparents who are watching this chain of tradition go from generation to generation. I certainly want to thank our president, Herb Finn, and our executive vice president, Adam Barshevsky, and the greater board of directors. We're going to see the board of director members on and off the Bima. Paula, thank you for representing our board right now. And within the greater board, we have done a tremendous amount of thinking towards our future, keeping our kids in mind, keeping every generation in mind, so that we can continue to ensure that through the people of Congregation Beth Judea, great things are happening. We can only do that together. Cantor, certainly want to thank you for all of your help and support throughout the year, and we're anticipating giving you maybe a handful of Hershey Kisses after Musaf today, so no pressure. Certainly, Lisa works so hard, our executive director, Lisa Nyman, in ensuring that our building and our facility and our friends, and that's so sweet, I love that. No, that's totally fine. It's the idea of being together and seeing the young faces and just kind of quelling inside. But many thanks to Lisa for ensuring that our Yom Tovim today are as we see them now. So thank you. And Mark Sender, certainly. Thank you for all of your support with our youth. Mark has been doing a wonderful job for us, as he has always in the past. There's some people behind the scenes who we don't always see, and sometimes we forget to thank, but every one of them deserves a strong thank you and words of appreciation. That's to Karen in our kitchen, who provides us with wonderful kiddushes, beautiful holiday meals. Karen works very hard, and she's very good at what she does. We know that Carlos and Manny, and this particular year, we want to wish a mazel tov to Carlos. He's not here as one of his children are getting married now. So that's very exciting for Carlos. And Manny has stepped in with his kids, with David and with Eric, and they did the whole setup for us today, which is wonderful. As I mentioned earlier, we've been working on security and safety for everyone. You know, we have a guard who comes every time we have an event here at the synagogue. Now, this isn't like a meeting in my office. We call the guard, unless you're really afraid of me now that I shaved my head. But we have that for when we gather together for simchas, for sorrows, for events. Our guard's name is Keith. If you haven't thanked Keith for being here, please thank Keith. He's sacrificing so much of himself to ensure that each one of us is safe. So thank you, Keith. And to those who helped instruct us on our security, to Marcus Melnick and Jeff Baygood, thank you, and the Greater Security Committee for all of your hard work. Bruce? We couldn't do it without you, Bruce, and I'll have to tell you that, you know, with all of your dedication and the dedication of the High Holiday Committee, to ensuring that Yontif is beautiful. Thank you for all that you do. The silver has been polished. I don't know if anyone noticed that, but the silver has been polished. And Bruce does that every year. Every year. Sometimes we think that things just kind of get done, but it's with volunteerism that things really get done. So Bruce, thank you. And certainly to Rana Liebeck and Beth Polanski, our beautiful Torah covers, our white, new, beautiful Torah covers that so many of us this year are enjoying in person. And for those who are joining far away, we hope you're finding them being exceptionally meaningful this year. We know that behind partition number 1, 2, and 3 back there, yeah, right back there, we have the support of Becky and Don Kagan and Enhanced Productions. Today we have Anthony with us, who has joined us from the very beginning, and Ross with us. Thank you both for ensuring that our high holidays are beautiful, meaningful here, and for those who are joining us on live stream, certainly. Allison, thank you. Thank you, and many thanks to Zach and to Evelyn. Thank you. She's telling me to stop. But really, I can tell you, I give what I give because I have the support of my family to give what I give, and I could do none of this without Allison and Zach and Evelyn. And certainly this year, you know, we just look around. Thank you, the greater congregation, Beth Judea family, thank you for all of your help and support and participation. It reminds us, because sometimes when we're out of sight and out of mind, it's hard to remember that what we do here in ritual and in prayer and in joining together in support and letting our voices be heard so that all of our prayers are recognized. Judaism is possibly more relevant today than it's been in years past, because it's taking us a certain amount of strength and courage to do the everyday things that we could have very easily said when we were thrown into the pandemic, you know, now, unfortunately, years ago. And we're now in this new stage of the pandemic, because I don't think that COVID is really going anywhere anytime soon. It takes a lot to bring ourselves together. It really does. And when things are hard to do, sometimes it's easier just to say that doesn't matter anymore. But it matters, and it matters very much. And thank you for all of your help and support, for making sure that Congregation Beth Judea is the loving congregation that we are, for making sure that our minyanim are attended and that Shabbat services are attended and volunteerism. I mentioned to Maddie Fingerhut as I was walking around. Maddie was the one who blew the shofar for us. You know, thank you. That was a beautiful shofar blowing, and I told Maddie that I was kvelling inside because I was saying to I was actually reliving an experience with my dad, where my dad, when I first blew the shofar and blew it very well, just the pride that he had, that he knew it was going to continue into the next generation. And Maddie assured me that we have nothing to worry about, that we're going to move into the next generation, really in a strong and vibrant way that helps us to connect to our past. I will tell you that with all of these various great things that are going on, we are a little bit out of practice, and that's okay, because if we weren't out of practice a little bit, we'd be rather automated and not animated, and we want to make sure that we stay animated with the things that we do as we talk about these serious topics. But something happened to me for the very first time as I was preparing for the high holidays. The very first time ever that members of the congregation that I'm privileged to serve, all of you here at Congregation Beth Judea, I got joke requests. I got joke requests for the holidays. And someone came up to me and they said, Rabbi, you remember when you were interviewing here, it seems like it was yesterday and so long ago and all of that, you told a parrot joke. And I said, which one? And they kind of laughed and they said, yeah, my rabbi's got more than one parrot joke. So we went through a couple of those jokes, and in fact, that was one that I told a while ago, and they asked that I tell it again. So, if you're watching at home, and this is you, here's your parrot joke. If you're here, here's a parrot joke. And if you don't like this parrot joke, I've got another. I've got 2 parrot jokes. So the story is this. Abe and Esther, they've lived their entire lives in Poland, a small town called Tomaszow Mazowiecki, and thank you, we've got the new microphone so I can kind of wander around and talk too, which is something that I like to do. And with our production company, they can follow me. So, someone's watching, let me tell you. But Abe and Esther, an old couple, they live in Tomaszow Mazowiecki in Poland. And there, they had 3 children, 3 sons. And they worked so hard to ensure that their sons developed a Jewish identity and that their sons always were able to appreciate the blessings that surrounded them and that their sons were always seeing the relevance in Judaism today and how we have to embrace it and grow and change over time. Now, Esther also loved the Tanakh. She loved the Tanakh, and she would read Torah stories to her kids all of the time. She would recite the Psalms all of the time, and it was something that brought her and her kids tremendous amount of meaning. So they decided that they were going to buy a bird. Okay? And this bird added to the joy because it would chirp and sing with all of the psalms and everything that was going on, and it was meaningful. They created their sacred space. They created their sacred time, and they loved each other unconditionally. Well, time passes, and the boys grow up, and Abe and Esther decide that they want to send them to America. They want to send them to America for their college education, and they go, and they get educated, they get master's degrees, they get doctorates, they get everything that they need to have in order to have the knowledge to succeed in the way that their parents want them to succeed. And the oldest son becomes an architect. The middle son becomes a car salesman. The last son, the youngest, the cleaner, he becomes an exotic pet veterinarian. Now, I know we have a couple of veterinarians here. I don't know if you deal with exotic pets, but this particular son had the training that he needed. So what happens? The architect says, we've got to pay back mom and dad for all of their sacrifices that they've given to us. The architect sends his finest builders and contractors to Tomaszow, Poland, and they build this enormous castle for their mom and dad. The car salesman, he says, you know what, they deserve to be driving around in style, and sends the nicest and sportiest and most luxurious cars, many of them, back to the house in Poland. The exotic pet veterinarian finds himself with this parrot, and this parrot has unbelievable skills. The parrot not only chirps along, but speaks. So the youngest brother, the youngest son, decides he's going to train the parrot to memorize all of the Tanakh. so that the parrot can go to Tamashav and just chant the Tanakh for his mother, and how beautiful and meaningful that would be. So they do all of these things, and time passes, and then finally, they get some thank you notes. The first son's thank you note read something like this: "You've always been special. You're our firstborn. You hold that special place in our hearts and in our minds, and we thank God every day for you. But what in the world were you thinking with building us this crazy house?" Dad gets lost getting up and going to the bathroom. I can't find the kitchen, and we've been living here for 6 months. So thank you for your thoughtfulness, but we don't understand the purpose of this gift. They send a letter to the second son, who owns the car dealership, and says, "Thank you so much for thinking about us. We've always wanted to be able to move around in style, but couldn't you have sent a driver? Dad hasn't driven in years. I haven't driven in years. We decided to start one of the cars, and we didn't know it was in gear, and backed into the garage that your brother built for us." The last son, the one who trains the parrots, this particular son is very dear to them, okay? And they write this beautiful thank you note. "My dear son, you are literally Acharon, Acharon, Chaviv. You're the one who's most dear to us. And you're thoughtful, and you're kind, and you think with your heart. And we couldn't thank you more for the delicious Shabbos chicken you sent to us." All right, that was a parrot joke upon request. I'll be taking requests all year. Just let me know. Just let me know. We're going to find that. So I imagine with all of that, that although the children's intentions, the son's intentions were all good, that probably left them a little bit with a broken heart. And that idea of a broken heart is something that I think many of us have experienced over the course of last year, from Rosh Hashanah 5782 to Rosh Hashanah 5783. It's certainly natural to experience a broken heart, but more often than not, a broken heart is more painful than any particular physical injury that we could sustain. I'd like to read to you a little section from this book, 60 Days. It's a spiritual guide to the holidays. I use this regularly on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and continuously find new meaning in the text. It says this: "The secret of a broken heart. We all make mistakes and break things in our life, but life also breaks us. We've all been broken in one way or another. We all experience broken promises or broken relationships. We've experienced the loss of a job or the loss of a loved one. Different people react in a different manner to the hurt that inevitably accompanies the breakage of our hearts. Some people are devastated, but others grow because of it. The rabbis teach that there is nothing as complete as a broken heart. When your heart is broken, you're in a place that is real. The reality is that the world is a broken place. It's a broken place full of broken people, full of broken hearts, whose job it is to help each other mend and to heal. I suspect that that idea of a broken heart is something that was among the reasons that we came to services today for Rosh Hashanah. It's relevant. We feel it. We see it in our world today. And that theme itself is really emphasized throughout our Torah reading over the course of day 1, Rosh Hashanah, to day 2. I'd like to start, though, in the reverse order. Not starting with the Torah reading, but rather talking about how devoted women shape our world and shape our biblical world, and probably are not thanked nearly enough. Let's talk about Hannah. Hannah, she was praying fervently. She had the ability to open her heart because her heart was so broken it couldn't be closed and it couldn't be whole anymore. So she was able to bare her soul to God. Now, I can only imagine the hurt that she felt when someone thought she was doing something else? Who was Eli to tell her how to pray? If Eli's the priest or the prophet of the time, how come he didn't know what she was doing? That's troubling to me today, and I hope in some ways it's very troubling to you, because that can bring about a certain sense of shame, and we fight those shameful feelings that we have regularly in our lives. Some of us can't do what others seem to do rather easily. Like Hannah, she bared her soul. For all of us today, I hope we do as well. Fervent prayer is something that uses familiar words to us. B'chol levavcha uv'chol nafshecha. With our full heart and our full soul. We say these words every day when we recite the Shema, and whereas the Shema itself is something that we're very familiar with, when we use b'chol levavcha v'chol nafshecha, these words, our whole heart and our whole soul, when it comes to God, God sometimes can be very unfamiliar to us, which makes this type of love, the love for God, the only entity that we're commanded to love in the entire Tanakh. We're told to respect our parents, but we're told to love God. And that's very personal, and that is very difficult, and that is something that's going to be different for all of us. But if we're unfamiliar with that process or that concept, then it becomes scary, because we're told to love something or someone or some entity that we're unfamiliar with. So how do we do that? No two types of love are the same, and more often than not, when we think about something that's so important to us that we love, b'chol levavcha v'chol nafshecha, with our whole heart and our whole soul, it's very emotional. At times it can be very irrational. And at times, we're left not knowing exactly what to do because we love someone so much. It's complicated and it can be scary. We see, in a sense, a similar type of love with Sarah as we go into the Torah reading. And Sarah teaches us invaluable and important life lessons, okay? Maybe Sarah is the one who's the exemplar of faith for us and not Abraham. We focus on the journey tomorrow of Abraham and Isaac going up the mountain Har HaMoriah, Mount Moriah, and there Abraham is tested and almost sacrifices Isaac. Not sure if that's exactly the exemplar of faith we want to follow, but the concept of that faith is really important. Sarah taught us more lessons in this short piece of text than I think Abraham could ever do. Sarah was tested with infertility. Sarah was tested in the relationship of Hagar and Ishmael to Abraham. Sarah was tested with having a child at 99 years old. And Sarah was tested by being completely shut out and silenced during the Akedah, the binding of Isaac. Sarah's broken heart was different. It was one that was directly tied to Abraham and to God. Or maybe Sarah's broken heart wasn't so different. Maybe our broken hearts are tied to God and those whom we love. When we think about betrayal and we think about devastation, we think about all of the life events that occur when we turn on our televisions today. I don't want to name any of them. But whatever you're thinking about is whatever I mean. We see crises, we see trauma, we see broken hearts, and all of that brokenness is something that changes us. Could you imagine what Sarah might have been thinking as she wakes up one morning? Abraham is gone, Isaac's gone. I bet you she wasn't saying they probably just went to the local Starbucks to get me a coffee, because that would be very nice of them to do. No, she wasn't thinking anything like that. She's silenced. There's no communication. Abraham does not tell her where he's going. He doesn't say goodbye. Isaac At this point in time, we're not even sure if he knew what was going on, but he didn't say goodbye. And if Abraham's intentions of fulfilling God's commandment the way he understood them meant anything, there was never going to be another goodbye. That was just going to be it. Lack of communication can be devastating, as we see with our opening biblical figures and story. I would suspect that this idea of feeling all bound together was probably the emotions that Sarah was feeling. She was experiencing her own Akedah as her kishkas were tied in knots because she doesn't know where Abraham is, where Isaac is. It's now been days. No one spoke a word to her. Rabbi Bradley Shavit Artson, who is the dean of the Ziegler School for Rabbinic Studies in Los Angeles and the vice president of American Jewish University, created a midrash about Sarah. Now, midrashim are very important to us because what they are, they're stories. They're stories. They're stories that help us to connect to other Torah stories in a deeper or more meaningful way. And in this particular case, Rabbi Artson was imagining in his midrash what Sarah might have been thinking and what God might have been thinking if God first approached Sarah about the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, and not Abraham. So this is a little midrash from Rabbi Artson, which I'm supplementing a little bit with my own midrash. God approaches Sarah, much like God approached Abraham and said, Sarah, I want you to take your son, your favorite son, and go up to Har HaMoriah, to Mount Moriah. This is going to be a test of faith, and you're going to sacrifice your son to me. Sarah's immediately saying to herself, who is this? I have one son. Who is this? And what is this voice telling me that I'm supposed to do? And Sarah says, who are you? Why are you asking me to do this crazy thing? And God responds, much like he did to Abraham. God says, I am God, creator of all. I created Adam and Eve. I created the Garden of Eden. I created all humanity. The world that you live in today would not be the world that you live in today without me. I'm the supreme source of all. Sarah says, no. Sarah says, you can't be God. Because God to me is loving and loyal and has mercy. And there is no God that I could ever think of responding to who would tell me, a mother after so many years, a mother after so many moments, so many minutes, to take my one child, and it wouldn't matter if I had 100 children, to take any of them and sacrifice them as a test of faith. You can't be that God. God says, who are you to question me? I'm God. I can do anything that I want to do. And Sarah says, no, she said, because you're not even able to answer my question, who are you? So let me ask you again. Who are you? What are you doing here? God was very frustrated at this point. He had never heard someone talk back to him in that type of way, someone to challenge what his desires are. God is looking for someone to fulfill his requirements without unnecessary understanding. Do it because I said to do it. Okay? That's now a common refrain in my home as Evelyn prepares for her bat mitzvah. But now, God says, God isn't feeling so great at this point because what God says is that, wow, Sarah really stood up to me. I know Abraham will do it. I'll go ask Abraham. So God goes and God says to Abraham the exact same things, a word we're familiar with, and says, take your son, your favorite son. You already banished Ishmael, so we're talking about Isaac. Take your son, your favorite son, and go up and sacrifice him to me. And Abraham says, all right, I'll do it. And they go up the mountain. We know the story, but God can't shake that question that Sarah asked him. Who are you? He keeps thinking about that. Who are you? And Abraham and Isaac are getting closer to the mountain. Isaac's starting to get bound on the altar. Who are you? When Abraham raised the knife, the ma'achelet, a strange word in our Hebrew language, ma'achelet. It's like, is it a knife? Is it an angel? Is it a holy knife? What is happening with this instrument that is meant not just to kill, but lishchot et beno, to slaughter Isaac? Okay? And we hear, Avraham, Avraham. God woke up. According to Rabbi Artson, God looked at himself in the mirror and he said, what kind of God am I? I created this world to choose life and do mitzvot. I chose to create a world that was filled with kindness and love and support and help. Who am I? I'm that God. I'm not a God who would cause or challenge or test anyone to do something as awful as to sacrifice a child. So when Avraham heard Avraham, Avraham twice, the first time was saying goodbye to who God thought he was. The second time was this birth of realization that God has to be filled with love and kindness and mercy, not with hate, not with crazy tests. Rabbi Artson suggests that what we know now as Adonai Yireh, the place where this was all taking place, it was originally supposed to be called Yirat Adonai, the fear of God. But Avraham changed that to be God sees. God sees and God understands. Well, as a result of this, Sarah dies, we know, and God calls her to the heavenly court. And because Sarah's question was still unanswered, and God has modeled that he remembers. So he calls Sarah to the holy court, and he says, Sarah, I have an answer for you for your question. Sarah said, what is it? God said, I'm a compassionate God. I'm a loving God. I'm a God who remembers and a God who forgives, and I am the sole God. There are none others like me. And Sarah said, good. She said, you passed my test because my test was for you to take a look at the world that you were building. Look in the mirror. Look in your soul. I didn't know who you were, and you didn't either. But now you do. We're put on this earth to live, love, and grow. We're not put on this earth to hate or to destroy. God's problem was that he couldn't see himself in the mirror. He couldn't look at himself and see who he really was and who was looking back at him. My guess is many of us have had that experience, and if you haven't, try. Look in the mirror, look deeply at yourselves, and see if you know who you are. It doesn't matter if we're young or if we're old. It's a tough task to do, to look in the mirror and say, this is someone who I'm completely happy with. The Dalai Lama was asked at one point in time, what surprised him most about humanity? Do you know what he said? He said, man, people. People surprised the Dalai Lama the most about humanity because people sacrifice their health in order to make money. Then those same people sacrifice their money to recuperate their health. And then those people are so anxious about the future that they don't enjoy the present. And as a result, these people don't live in the present or the future. They live sometimes in the past. They live as if they're never going to die. But the Dalai Lama said that his biggest concern and paradox that he found within humankind is that these type of people, when they die, they never really have lived. I suspect that teaching applies to many of us, is that we work and we stay focused, we make ourselves sick, we have high medical bills, we worry about the future, we worry about what got us here, and in the end, we just end up exhausted and not feeling like we truly lived. So our question today is, how do we remember and honor the past while we plan for the future and take the necessary time to enjoy the present? We need self-care. I'm terrible at that. I'm not alone in this room. People who are terrible with that. We need to take care of our families. We need to take care of our community. We have to give of ourselves so that we can ensure that others enjoy. We give of ourselves to make sure that others are able to experience things in beautiful and meaningful ways, much like I mentioned with our guard. Carlos, Manny, Lisa, everyone works so hard so that we can feel the community care. And certainly for me, I'll tell you on a very personal level, it's the idea of this past year for me. I had two significant medical events happen. The one was my surgery following the holidays last year, and I'll tell you, I was very fortunate with Allison and Zach and Evelyn to take care of me, but this congregation took care of me like I had never seen or experienced before. So with that, I want to say thank you to all of you for your unyielding kindness and support. And the same can be said from when I had COVID several weeks ago. It was one of those experiences with COVID that really knocked me for about 2 weeks. And the calls and the support, I thank you all very, very much. So when we think about our lives, we need to create a midrash. We need to gain a better understanding. And the midrash that we write for ourselves is, how do we spend our lives? It can't be how we waste our time or how we must stay stagnant in the past and not look at growth or learning for the future. This type of imagery, as I mentioned, is very prominent in our themes today. We have a physical sense, but we don't necessarily have the spiritual sense. But God does, because God realized who God is, and God reminds us that when we judge ourselves, we should not be afraid. When God judges us, we have to put our best feet forward. La'el orech din, God is the divine judge of us all, and while that might be a little bit scary for us to consider, we also have to remember that God is clothed in righteousness, which gives us hope and gives us love. God's compassionate to his people and watches over all of us with love. God strengthens us, upholds us, and allows ourselves to place our trust and our hope in God. Remember this, another midrash. Remember this. If the world was created only with mercy, then the world would be full of sinners, right? We could do anything we wanted. God will forgive us. We'll forgive each other. It'll all be okay. But if God was created only with strict judgment, how would it survive? We could do nothing right. And I have a feeling that we know people in our lives who always judge us with mercy, and then there are people in our lives who judge us in a very strict way, and nothing we do is right. The result is we need a mix of people. And the result is that we have to commit to becoming better. The imagery of the two books, the book of life and the book of something else, permeates our visions today of judgment. But the Talmud teaches us that there are actually 3 books that are open. Shlosha sefarim niftachim b'Rosh Hashanah. 3 books are opened on Rosh Hashanah. The first is for the completely righteous people. That book's not too thick. The second is the book for the completely awful people. That book's not too thick either. And then there's the third book, the book that all of us are in. It's the book of we're somewhere in the middle. We're not 100% good. We're not 100% bad. But we have to move from that middle book into another. What that demands of us is to take responsibility for our actions and our decisions and our inactions. We have to avoid rationalizing our bad decisions. It'll all be okay. I did this. I didn't mean it. Because when someone else does that, we don't rationalize their behaviors. We have to minimize the impact of our bad decisions And we have to right those things that we've done wrong. We need to recognize when we've hurt someone, and it's up to us to make it right. And this is really important. We need to create realistic expectations for ourselves, at the same time tempering the expectations of others. When we look in the mirror, we are going to find that we see a perfect example of imperfection. To move from the middle book, we have to have patience for each other. And my hope, in my prayer this Rosh Hashanah, is that we're inspired by Chana, and we don't let perceptions of others hold us back. My prayer is that we have the tenacity of Sarah to stand up for what we believe in, and with the understanding that sometimes that can be very scary. Perhaps most of all, we have to remember that we're reflections of God and need to be merciful and kind to ourselves and to each other as we begin the process of growth, change, and building a bright future. May the new year 5783 bring us and the greater world increased health and healing. We all need that. Meaningfulness and intentional change, we need that as well. Humility to recognize our faults, and the courage to forgive ourselves and others. May we do this with boundless love and patience, and of course, to succeed, we must do this together. Shana Tova, Good Yantiv.